Hello there. This is a recap of my Castles and Crusades campaign, session 42. This session was uh, had the what we affectionately call the B team characters. So a bunch of my players have backup characters or secondary characters. Not really backups. Maybe they could be backups. I guess they when we do different things in the campaign that kind of go away from what the main characters are doing, which are the bulk of the recaps have been about, bring in the B team. And this session kind of came about by accident because I was planning on running a session of Vason, but we initially thought my son wasn't going to make it because he's been sick with the flu, and I didn't want to start that mystery without him because it wasn't going to be a one shot, and so I didn't want to start without him. So I was like, well, I'll throw something together for the B team because Orvon, which is a B team character, although he's an original character, one of the original characters of the campaign, played by my friend Chris. I have a quest. I've had a quest in mind for Orvon evolving around his knightly order for quite some time. So, and I had told the guys recently that I wanted to run that, and if they were interested, they were in playing it. So I was like, well, I'll use this session tonight that I ran actually technically last night. I'll use this session to get their characters all together because Orvon, to my knowledge, he's never adventured with my friend Matt's secondary character, Partry, the halfling ranger druid, and my son, who showed up by quite surprise yesterday. I didn't think he was going to be here. He ended up playing a character he'd been thinking about as a B team character, and so he played him last night. So with that as clear as mud, we had three characters last night, 3 players. So we had Orvon, the half elf knight, and Partry, the halfling druid slash ranger, and we're using the multi-class rules, or a version of them. They came from the Cast Crusades Yigsburg book. They so far seem to be working. And my son was playing his character, Dern the Dirty, which is he's a dwarven druid, and he's quite the interesting character with his whopping 4 intelligence. So we're really seeing how this is going to shake out. So we got started a little slow with some chatter, and people had to finish up some of their characters, like, because Orvon, when we last saw Orvon, when he was a regular cast member for the main campaign, he was level 3. So this group's a little bit more advanced, so they're around like level 6. So Orvon has in game had gone away back to Windbreeze Tower, where his mentor, a knight named Lord Dalen, is from. Undergone training, whatnot, and when he came back, he was given a few tasks by Lord Dalen, but that led up to him. So he comes back into the game with a little bit of advance. We advanced him to 6th level. So we start off the session with Orvon on the road north, and he's been given some tasks. He needs to go. His primary task is he needs to travel to a place called Wyvern's Spire, and that used to be a stronghold of his knightly order, and it wasn't called that when they controlled it. And that was back before the Dragon Wars, which was 150 years ago, roughly, in campaign time. And he, that place was the Griffin Riders of Asharn is the knightly order, and that was their most northern outpost. And when the forces from the north, the Aldani Empire, invaded, that was one of the first places they hit. It was attacked by a flight of wyverns led by a red dragon, and it was lost. And it was even after the war and the Aldani were driven back beyond the God Peak Mountains, it was never reclaimed because southern Adon, the continent, the southern part of Adon was very politically and physically fractured, mostly because of the war. So it was just never reclaimed. So Lord Dalen has tasked Orvon to travel there and find an item of note, and that's kind of left very vague. Like he has to find something noteworthy and bring it back to Lord Dalen, and this is part of his progression as a knight in that order. The other parts of things that he's been tasked with is he has to recruit. He's like, as a knight, he's also a leader, so he has to recruit his own band of followers, adventurers, to undertake this quest. So he knows, Orvon knows, like coming from having spent some time in Arden, that there's people there to be had that he could recruit, most likely. He knows how hardy those folks are, and he is headed back that way. And Arden's also a good starting off point for this travel to Wyvern Spire, the ruins of Wyvern Spire. The third thing he's been directed by Lord Dalen is he's been assigned a squire, and that squire is one of Lord Dalen's son, a young man in his mid-teens named Willem Estenbrook, and he's been assigned to him as a squire. So we start off. That's how we start off. My friend Chris is given that information and does what he will. So they're on the road north. The first character they come across south of the city of Dornval along the road is Dern the Dirty, this dwarf, who's arguing with a badger at the time, his companion. I think they were arguing over something to eat or food, or I think it was a piece of meat or something. Dern's very interesting. He's based on, let's see if I can get a picture of, get it in frame. He's based on this miniature here by Reaper Miniatures. So we have this dwarf wearing a green toga, who's barefoot with a scythe, and he's got a headdress of deer antlers. And so they meet, and some discussion is had, and he joins the party, and they continue north. They actually travel to the city of Dornval. They don't spend a lot of time there. Dern's actually very uncomfortable there. His village is not too far from Dornval, but he has never been there. He has no interest in the city. Some interesting things come out as we're playing along here about, even my son had forgotten about the background we discussed for his character was, and this comes out a little bit later, I'll get to that, but he wasn't always the way he is. So they pass from Dornval and continue north, and they hit Moss Haven. This has taken several days, like close to a week and a half at this point, and we just kind of breezed through it. There was no real encounters. There was some role play between the characters and stuff, which was great, and the players. They stop over in Moss Haven, which has been seen before in sessions. I did add an inn to Moss Haven, like a named inn, the Inn of the Dancing Bear. They stayed there. Find it very accommodating. Even Dern liked it. The beds were very comfortable. He enjoyed that. And then they continue north until they're they end up a few miles from Arden. And they come across the scene of an overturned cart and a bunch of blood around it, fairly fresh. Matt's character, my friend Matt's character, Partry, he also comes across this, and he actually comes across it slightly ahead of the party by mere minutes. And he's this kind of erratic, or he's erratically going through the woods, because they're in the they're cutting through the edge of the southern Homewood Forest. And he's describing his character as like practicing combat, and he's diving and doing rolls and, you know, slinging stones or shooting arrows or whatever, or just practicing all that. So he's all covered in leaves and grass and pine needles and pitch and stuff. And then he stumbles out quite accidentally onto the main road. He didn't realize how close to the road he was. And he finds this scene, and then he hears the rest of the party coming up from the south, and ducks back into the woods and hides because he's not sure who it is or what's going on. Eventually, he joins up with the party. So they try to figure out what happened. They do introductions, of course, and then they try to figure out what happened with this cart. There's nobody around it. There's just a lot of blood. And the horse that was pulling it has been the barding and tackle and all that stuff is just broken. And through some very abysmal tracking checks, Partry is not really able to discern what's going on there. But I basically described it like this horse got dragged eastward, and you didn't really need to be a tracker to figure that out. It was a fairly large track. So they get through a couple hundred yards of the edge of the forest before it turns to rolling hills and grassland. And they get there. Partry, he makes another check with because the terrain is different. I allowed him another check, and this one was very successful. So he finds this trail, which again is fairly easy to follow. But he gets more information. He doesn't recognize what the track is, but he realizes there's actually two of these creatures, and one of them is dragging the horse. This continues on. They follow the trail until it comes to a hole in the ground, a fairly freshly dug hole in the ground, and there's a lot of blood around the entrance of this hole. Partry goes down into the hole and starts exploring. He comes to this, it's like a big burrow, and as he's down there, he feels the ground shake a little bit, and one of these guys pops up out of the ground. This is a Ankeg miniature from Reaper Miniatures, and pops up out of the ground. He's joined by Dern and the rest of the party. Willem stays up. He's kind of directed to stay behind. He's not really a combatant. He's more just Orvon's squire and assisting. Takes care of all of his gear and all that stuff. There's some interesting things that came out about Willem while we were role-playing amongst the characters and him. It's kind of established that Willem is probably the smartest member of this band. So that's been very amusing. And there was some banter between Dern and Willem and Badger. Dern's Badger, very creative name. But what do you expect with a 4 intelligence? So Badger has bitten Willem a few times, and so Willem's not entirely sure about what his father has sent him off to do, although he has great amount of respect for Orvon, and he does want to become a knight. Like he's not a reluctant squire. He does want to be a knight. So they explore down here. They ultimately, good use of an entangle spell here, kept this thing immobile. It also eventually trapped Orvon a little bit, but Orvon was still, despite the penalties that he incurred, was able to hit this thing, and they beat that thing. They took a little bit of damage. They explore on. They come down this way, and they find a little alcove that's been dug out, and it has a large thing of eggs. So it's got these basic Ankeg eggs. The players know what they are. Their characters don't. None of them have encountered it. Although Orvon, actually, was it Orvon? Orvon and I think Partry both recognize, they get a little bit of a clue because Lork, who they've adventured with, has armor made from the shell of an Ankeg, a large Ankeg that they killed early on in the campaign. So they do kind of recognize and maybe figure out what it is. They have a decent idea. They destroy these eggs. They're like, this can't be good. We can't let these hatch. Imagine if, like, there was all these hatched and how worse it would be for everybody around this area. So they destroy those eggs. Dern does that with a spell. He burns them. And they continue on. This actually dead ends. So they push on. They come back this way. They start up this way. And they're attacked by another one. And what's happening there mechanically behind the scenes is I'm rolling every once in a while. I'm rolling a D6. And if it comes up a 1, bang, they get one of those things pops up. And they have to deal with it. And they do. They fight this one. This is a little close quarter fight. We had Orvon in the lead. Knight, he wants to be up front. They got some magical lighting, so lighting is taken care of. Willem's pulling up the rear with Badger. And so they get hit with some attacks and some acid spray that the Ankeg can spew out. But they eventually defeat it. They do a pretty good job and defeat it pretty quickly. They push on, and I'm going to have a hard time showing this because they didn't get to see a lot of this, but they push on, that tunnel winds on, and then they come to another wider part of the burrow. And this area is a little bit different because the wall to their right is worked stone, like it's stone blocks, and there's a hole that's been dug through the middle of it. Durin, being a dwarf, he uses his like stone cunning, I don't know what they call it, but his able to determine a lot of things about stone and depth underground. They realize that like during this whole thing that they're probably never more than like 50 feet below ground. A lot of times when they hit these high-rise areas, they're much closer, like probably 10 feet below the surface. Well, he looks at this stonework, determines that it's at least 200 years old and it was built by humans. They poke a torch in there or some of their magical light, and they see that there's actually, it's a completely worked stone room with 2 sarcophagus in it with a set of doors across from them, all closed up. At this point, we actually were running out of time for the evening, so we called the session there, and we'll pick it up next week, and we should be able to finish it up. I have a little bit, there's a little bit more to it, but it was a real fun session. The characters were very fun. It's an interesting party. So there's a couple of interesting things that happened with this session. Like I said at the beginning of the video, it was kind of an impromptu session. Like I did not plan on running this, and the bulk of this session and what they're dealing with was built out of this book here. This is the Dread Laronomicon from Raging Swan Press. I think that's what they're called. I'm pretty sure. And I have a bunch of their products. This is a really good book. It's all about layers. And there was an entry for Ankeg's layers, and I built it. And the funny thing is I built this layer. There's a Dwarven Forge burrow. I don't get to use a lot, but I like to pull them out when I can. I built it, and I had, there's some stuff here on the other end that you haven't seen yet. You'll see it at the end of the next recap. Then I went and I started reading the book again, and I got ideas for other stuff. So it grew. So if we, it's a bigger adventure than I started with. But most of the bulk of the entire session was built out of this book. So it's a super good book. If you're looking for random stuff, you need some ideas. It has layers for like all this stuff, monstrous layers. And it's a system neutral book, so you can use it for anything. It's great. It has a companion book. This is actually a companion book to the Dread Thingonomicon, which is probably twice the thickness of that book. And this book is actually it might be more than 200 pages. Yeah, it's like, well, it's right around 200, like 210, 211 pages. The other one is even thicker. Really good books. You get them on drive-through. I use them a fair amount in my campaigns, especially when I'm just looking to come up with ideas, and something to spark the imagination. Yeah, so that was an interesting part of this, was it was just built out of that. The other thing that came up is with these players, especially these three, Matt and Bryson and Chris, I ran a 5e campaign for them that lasted about 5 years. We took some breaks here and there, but we actually just finished it a couple years ago. And like a week or two ago. Sorry. And quite honestly, it's the best campaign I've ever run. It was so much fun. The role play was just next level. Like, those guys were awesome. I mean, there was sessions where a bulk of the session I was a spectator. They just went off and they were very much into their characters and what was going on and investigating the mysteries. And it was set in a different area of my setting called Valdova, which is very much inspired by like old school Warhammer, even Ravenloft, which they actually ended up dealing with some Ravenloft stuff, but very grim, and a lot of undead problems over there. Like, and there's reasons for that. So we finished that up like a week or two ago, and that, like I said, it was awesome. We had a great after session after the finale. We sat around for at least an hour just talking about the campaign. And one of the things I said was, we're going to do some short interim stuff, but I really wanted to get back to, I wanted to do a campaign for those guys again, because that was such a great experience. And we talked about, I hummed and hawed and for a day or so, but the idea started flowing, and I was like, oh, we'll go back to Valdova. So, and everybody was on board with that. and I'm starting to prep stuff, and I'm writing, building, fleshing out a new area, and they're coming up with character ideas. So last night, we're playing this session, and like I said, it's an impromptu session with the B team, and we're about 10 minutes in, and the role play is already really good. Like, they're getting into their characters, and they're very different. Like, there's, like I said earlier, Willem the Squire is probably the smartest guy in the party. Not that everybody's like darn dumb with a 4 intelligence, but there's no wizards in this group. There's no anything like that. And the tone of it was a little bit more like comedic, but it was also in character. It was good. It was really good. And it was Matt that said, we were like 10 minutes in, he said, what if we played these guys as our next campaign? And we kind of laughed, and I was like, well, yeah, I'm open, and I think I said, I'm open to do whatever you guys want to do. But that really got me thinking. And then by the end of the session, we had so much fun with these characters and what was going on. That became the idea, is like, we're going to play these guys as our next campaign. Our friend Steve will be joining in, hopefully. He plays Pounder, the half-ogre. He was going to play tonight, last night in this session, but he came down with this flu bug that's going around, so he was sick. So hopefully we'll get him in, maybe not the next session because they're kind of in the middle of this, but definitely the session after. If he's able to play, he'll be in, which will be great because he'll have some big muscle with him as a Pounder, the half-ogre barbarian. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. And what that is going to allow me to do is I can take Orvon's quest, which was going to be kind of like a one-shot, maybe a couple sessions. I can really stretch that out. I've already started to look at like the terrain and what they're going to be going through to get there. And I'm like, oh, well, I can set like a whole adventure just in that area. Like, I'm not in a rush anymore to just get them to the end zone and play out their adventure. I can really flesh it out more. We can make a full campaign out of it. Who knows what will happen after Orvon's quest is finished. I already have some ideas for another adventure I could send them through. And I can kind of... One of the things I really like about doing this is they're attached to the main campaign with, Lork and Barry and Cosmo and Sprawl and the others. But they're also separate. So what this does is it develops the campaign and the setting in different areas that like those guys aren't able to get to, because sometimes if you've run campaigns for a while, and I haven't run a lot of like pre-written stuff, very little, so a lot of homebrew stuff, and in my experience I found that stuff, I really like it because sometimes it takes a life of its own and it just goes in this direction you didn't plan. And I'll have this great idea that I want to use for but I like to get the group back to that idea. It just doesn't seem like to happen because they're doing something else, which is fine. That's perfect. But I saved that idea, and now I have the B team. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's something the B team can involve. So this adventure after Orvon's quest that I'm kicking around, the idea is actually a pre-written one that I'll have to modify for my setting, but that would definitely be something that would probably be easier to achieve with the B team than the A team, I guess. So really neat. It was an unexpected turn of events for what we were going to play in the future. But I'm excited by it for those reasons, and I'm looking forward to whatever they come up with next. So we're going to finish this up next week. Then we'll actually be back to kind of an every other week type thing where my son runs his game one week and I'll run mine the next. But we want to finish this one up, so we'll do this next week, and then a couple weeks from that we'll have the next session of this. So hopefully that will be the beginning of Orvon's quest. Hopefully, should be. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for enduring my rambling. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the comments and stuff I get. And if you have any questions about anything, as the normal, questions about miniatures, terrain, game, setup design, if you're a new dungeon game master and trying to figure out if you want to do homebrew or pre-written stuff, fire them off. I'm glad to answer whatever questions I can. I appreciate you all watching. I'll catch you at the next one.